Well, thank you, everyone. First of all, can you hear me? I have a tendency to speak loud and fast, and so I'm going to do my best to make sure I communicate. And then you guys all, this is the universal symbol for slowing down. So if I'm too excited, just do that right there. But before we get started, thank you, everyone, for being here. It's tremendous that you would take a day off to come and do this. I owe just so much to Sarah for being willing to host, and for Susan and her willingness to speak and all her help, and Dom Lepore, who's going to speak this afternoon, and Amy. All these things just couldn't have happened. I'm just very, very thankful that you would take this time. But again, my name is Gordon Duncan. I know a lot of you. Some of you have just met for the first time. And some of you, I may not have a chance yet to say hello, but I want to do that later on. But yes, I've been married to Amy for nearly 26 years, and we do have three amazing daughters, Meredith, Landry, and Emma, and they really are just the best part of mine and Amy's life. I'm very thankful for them. But by way of getting started today, what I want to do is, I'm a mover, so I'm going to do my best to make sure you can still hear me. But I want to start with a story that'll help us get started for LeaderShift, and it begins in 2012. So in 2012, Amy and I were living in a town called Garner, North Carolina, which is outside of Raleigh. It's a little suburb, and we were there because at that time I was a full-time pastor, church planter. Now, a church planter is when a group or an organization sends out someone and says, hey, start a church where one doesn't exist. And we had been there since '05, and we did what's called a parachute plant or a scratch plant. That's when you go into a town with no people and you start from scratch, or they parachute you in and go do it. Well, as you can imagine, when you do a situation like that, you often have to have a second job. That's called bivocational church planting, and that's what I did. I was an optometric consultant, working with eye doctors and planting and pastoring and doing whatever needed to get done at that time. And it was wonderful and wonderfully exhausting. Day in and day out, Amy and I loved what we did, and I'd have to wake up each day and go, who am I today? Am I a consultant? Am I a pastor? Am I a missionary? Am I a dad? And my kids were helping at church, and Amy it was wonderful. But we were just flat burned out. And we had an opportunity to go stay at a friend's house up the lake in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we loved this house. There's no internet and no cable. And my kids would just curl up on the couch and we'd read books. It was a place of rest for us. And so we got there, and this is April 2012. And the goal is to just break away from everything, right? You've had those moments where you're like, we did it. We got there. We got to the vacation spot. We got where we can relax. And I received a phone call from my sister that said, Gordon, Dad just passed away. Now, my father, Tom Duncan, I had a tremendous relationship with him. His nickname was Sam, and that's probably a conversation for the after party. I'll tell you how he got called Sam. But she said, Dad just passed away. And Dad was one of my cheerleaders. He was also a pastor and a writer and an artist, and so many of the great qualities I got from him. So, and some of you have been through that. Some of you have lost a father, and you just know what that impact is, perhaps. So, it wasn't completely a surprise. My father had every poor health condition in the world. I mean, he diabetes and was on oxygen, but we didn't expect in that moment that he'd pass away. Well, soon after I got out of that phone call, my brain is thinking, well, we're going to pack up from vacation and explain to the kids and head home. And I received another phone call just immediately following, and I didn't even look and see who it was. Just bleary-eyed, I just assumed it had something to do with my father's passing. So I answered that call, and it was from a pastor here in Fredericksburg. And he said he didn't know anything about what's going on with my dad, didn't know we were on vacation. And he said, Gordon, I want to get straight to the point. I'd like for you to move to Fredericksburg and start another church. And I said, well, listen, thank you for the invitation, but I've never thought about leaving the church I planted. I've never thought about planting a second one. And really, right now, the most pressing issue is my father's just passed. And so I'm just going to say thank you, but no. And we've just got these things in front of us, but it's not something I've really ever considered. And he was very gracious. And in fact, some of the folks from Fredericksburg that were interested in us coming up actually went to my father's funeral. It made a huge impact on me. I was like, I don't know you folks, and how kind of you. Well, over the next few months, I'm trying to learn, how to be a man without a father, and the folks here in Fredericksburg keep asking us. And so Amy and I said, hey, well, we'll help out a little bit. And they asked us to design a church plant proposal, which is a lot like a 3-year business plan. Many of you have done that, but it's more geared towards mission and vision and demographics and how do you start a church. And they finally told us over the course of that time, listen, we're not going to wear you out, but this is yours if you want it. Well, we began to think, maybe the church we started might be better with a new vision or a new voice, or it might be exciting, but you can imagine all the obstacles that are in front of you, and the economy is still not completely put back together in 2012. Well, finally, after a series of time, Amy and I felt like it was the right thing for us to do, and my primary concern was my mother. I mean, she'd been married to my dad 52 years. She basically walked off the podium with her diploma in 1955 and walked up to the altar and got married, and so that had been her entire life, and she's trying to figure out how to get out of bed every morning. And that was my primary concern, but I had siblings in the area, and so Amy and I, in August of that year, it was on a Tuesday, I remember we were at our favorite little sushi restaurant, and so we sat down with Mom and said, Mom, we're really thinking about doing this, but I'm worried about you. And Mom was my second cheerleader, and she was like, no, this would be great for you guys, this is the perfect thing for you guys to do, go do it, I'll be fine. And so I always have to share this next part of the story gently. That was on a Tuesday, but on that Friday, my mother got in a car crash and passed away. And I mean, that's 2 parents in 4 months, both of which were like, I mean, really, I was blessed. Whatever conflict from teenage years we had already worked through, I mean, they were my go-tos. And there was a mercy about it, as you can imagine. I mean, my mom didn't suffer, and I mean, she really didn't know what to do with herself each day. And so there was a mercy about it, but we felt freed up. Maybe, you know, as you get time to process, you know, maybe in some way that frees us up to come to Fredericksburg. Well, between August and January, we're going through all the details. How do you guys sell a house? You got to raise money. You got to move your business up here. And I began having pauses. And what I mean by that is I would be in a conversation with you, and all of a sudden, I really wouldn't be present. I would pause, and my eyes would kind of glass over a little bit, and they became more frequent, and Amy was like, we need to go see the doctor. So we went to see the doctor, and so great doctor, and he asked me one question. He goes, do you have any stress in your life? And I just kind of laughed. I was like, well, you know, both my parents have passed. I've got a new job. I've got to move to Fredericksburg. I got a lot of stress in my life. And he said, well, I just think the best thing for you would, why not eliminate some of the stress in your life? I'm like, well, thank you. You know, I mean, it's not his fault. I probably would give him the same diagnosis, but not really any way to eliminate stress in my life at that point in time. And then 9 years ago yesterday, we moved to Fredericksburg. It's providential that those line up that way. And we were a mess. I mean, just a flat-out mess. I mean, we didn't even have a Christmas tree that year. I mean, we were just a mess getting up here. And there's a large task in front of us. You know, starting a church, we were living with a family for 3 months. We were trying to raise money, and I'm still trying to consult. You know, all the things that you can imagine to go. You guys have had big moves before. But the problem was my pauses became more frequent and more intense. So they would last longer. I would begin to make no sense when I was speaking. I had one when I was driving, which is kind of terrifying. I had one while I was running, which was terrifying. And finally, at church one Sunday, I'm up behind the podium and I'm speaking, and I have a very long pause. And funny enough, everyone in the crowd thinks I'm just getting caught up in the spirit. They just thought it was a wonderful little moment. And I come back and finish, and there was a doctor in the crowd, and he grabbed me afterwards and he said, Gordon, you just had a seizure. And I had seen seizures before. My impression of a seizure was maybe what the stereotypical idea of losing bodily control and various things like that. And he said, no, what you just had is called a silent seizure or a partial complex. You're partially aware, but that's what happened. Now, wonderfully, he's like, I know a neurologist. Go to this neurologist, this one alone. And I owe so much to that neurologist. He knew exactly what was going on. I went through all the EEGs and the CAT scans, and he's like, yes, you have brain damage in your left frontal lobe, and it's never going to go away. And we'll never be able to stop these seizures, but we can find meds that lower the ceiling of impact, if you will. So over the next couple of months, this is 2013, I'm on and off meds. My brains were scrambled, I'll be honest with you. Going on and off various meds, trying to find the right one. I'm exhausted. I'm still recovering emotionally, trying to start a church. I'm driving back to North Carolina to work with eye doctors, raising children, being a parent. And I went from running 3 marathons in 2012 to that year I couldn't run a mile. I had to come home during the day just to to take a nap to maybe have energy to go back and again. And I don't know if any of you, some of you have, I know you've shared with me, you have those seasons where you lose your health and it's terrifying. I felt like to some extent I was losing everything. Well, the story gets a little bit more difficult. I promise you there's some sunshine in the story, but let's go to 2014. And I had a mentor in my life. His name's Terry Traylor. You're going to learn more about him later. And in 2014, I had lunch with Terry Traylor, and the next day I got a phone call, and it said, Gordon, Terry has died. He was on the treadmill, and he had a heart attack. And Terry, to me, and Amy will attest to this, Terry was Superman. Like, really, I mean, to me, Terry was Superman. And I couldn't imagine Terry not being, I literally had just had lunch with him the day before. And so all of a sudden the losses are piling up, right? I mean, and I'm still trying to get my brain back. One more, guys. I've got one more for you. We go to 2015. We're about 30 months here. And the doctor says, guys, Amy has thyroid cancer. If there's a good cancer, he tells us, it's a good cancer, which we all kind of go, yeah, I don't know what that is. It's like a good audit from the IRS. I don't know what like, okay. We need to have it December 30th. That way insurance covers it, right? You got to play the insurance game. If you go January 1st, go meet your deductible, right? So we go home for Christmas. And Amy's surgery's on the 30th. And on Christmas Day, Amy's mom, who I affectionately called Mom, I mean, her parents were my parents at this point in time, right? Mom comes down Christmas morning and says, Gordon, Jack's not waking up. Her father. So I run upstairs and Jack has passed. Now, combination of CPR skills from summer camp and 911 and chest compressions and Jack comes back. A horrifying but thankful moment that all that, you know. And my kids are downstairs waiting for presents, right? So Jack goes into the hospital, and so we spend some time with him, but we've got to go home for cancer surgery. And so if I may get the dates wrong, but I believe Amy's surgery was on the 30th. She comes out of the surgery, and on the 31st, we get the phone call, Jack's passed. And at this point in time, you're just wondering, is there a shadow? You're like, God, what's going on? I mean, and for me, I'm like every significant mentor in my life, and for family, and then Amy's surgery, we're standing in the, what do you call it, the receiving or the welcoming line at a funeral? I don't know what the official name is. And Amy can't speak. I mean, she's still got the bandages, and I'm thinking how brave she is at that moment, but we're just a mess, right? And so if you ask my daughters or us, everybody has those seasons that kind of mark the shifts in their lives, but those 30 months are it for us. I mean, we've got other ones, but my kids talk about those times. And as they're older, 2018 and 15 now, we're able to interact a little bit more about what that impact was. But truly the most challenging and difficult time in our lives. And so wonderfully, Amy, the cancer surgery was successful, and she's had some rebound of health from those things. Amy's mom's still alive, and my seizures are relatively under control. We have a lot to be thankful for. But I share all of that to look back and ask myself, what did I learn from those times? Because there were a lot of shifts and a lot of pivots necessary for us to function as a family, to raise the church, to start a business. I mean, if I didn't figure out the shifts or the pivots, if I didn't have people helping with those things, we could very well just stop. Marriages could end. Kids could have the worst situations. All of that was a possibility after you walk through those valleys. So I'd like to share, to get us started, 3 very personal shifts or pivots that we learned that might be helpful for you guys, both personal and professional, and hopefully in it, it'll give you guys some practical takeaways for your personal life, or family, or business. But these were lessons learned the hard way. So I want to start with the first one. And it might seem very, very common. It might be, Gordon, that's common sense, but that's usually what we have to be reminded for. And the first one is the need and the willingness to ask for and receive help. The need and the willingness to ask for and receive help. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not great at that. I like being self-sufficient. I love me some me. I usually think, hey, I can do it, right? I can figure it out. I'm not the first person to say, can you help me? And I'll be honest with you, at the root of that, let's all be, you don't have to nod your head, the root of that is probably pride or ego. It's hard sometimes to say, I need help. And when people offer it, we're quick to go, oh, no. Someone wants to bring you a meal or something, nah, we're fine. You're fine. At least maybe you've had those moments where you've turned away help. And I've had those moments where, in the midst of that, I had no choice but to ask for it. I'd like to share one example of when we received it and one example from business where I was able to offer it. But when we were in North Carolina for the funeral for Amy's father, some folks from our church, my buddy Danny, he's my running buddy, he called me and goes, we'd like to do two things for you. He goes, we'd like to clean your house and we'd like to take down your Christmas decorations for you. Now, as you can imagine, our house was not people come over and clean house ready. Not when you go through the stretch. Maybe some of you have had someone come over and clean your house before and you kind of pre-clean it. You know what I'm talking about? You do let's get rid of the embarrassment so they can come and clean, kind of clean. We didn't have that. We were barely holding on. But strangers weren't coming into our house to clean the toilets. Friends were coming into the house. And all I can say was yes. I honestly don't know what you're going to walk into, and the boxes for the Christmas decorations are in the basement, and all we can do is just accept it. I could have said no, right? I could have said no and let ego walk through that, but all it would have done is given me more to clean and put it on my kids. But it gave me a reminder, it gave me that moment to say, why wouldn't I say yes when someone offers help? Why wouldn't I? What would I accomplish other than making it more difficult for myself and my family? Let me share a professional example. In my eye care consulting, I was working with a wonderful doctor outside of Greensboro, North Carolina. She had built a wonderful practice. And a lot of that industry is designed to build a practice for future sale. And at a young age, she had been approached for someone to purchase her practice. And she was going to be able to pivot herself. But the people who wanted to purchase her practice had one thing that was preventing them from getting there. They did not like her staff in any way. Now, you can buy a practice and get the whole staff, but you put yourself in a difficult situation. So the whole situation was on pause for 6 months. And so she reached out to me and she said, I can't do this. I want this, but I don't know what to do with my staff. Maybe some of you have been in a leadership situation with your staff and you really don't know what to do to fix it. You may not have the freedom to fire everybody and start all over again. And control, deleting a whole staff is not easy. And so she brought me in and I spent a day observing the staff and meeting them and I just walked around in observation. And at the end of the day, she goes, what do you recommend? And I was like, well, I recommend you give me some more time in observation. When was the last time your staff received an evaluation? She goes, I don't know. She goes, because the staff treats me like an older sister more than a boss. And we've gotten into that rut, and I literally don't know how to get out of it. And I was like, well, let me come in and do an objective evaluation. You're free. I was like, and so I'm going to give them an evaluation. They can evaluate. I'm going to evaluate. You evaluate. We all get together. And let's use this as a way to kickstart the team. And she was nervous. Can you imagine? Her staff had become friends. You do love them, even though they've become, infighting siblings almost. But there was one staff who did not like me. You can imagine? She gave me the stink eye every time I got there. And to some extent, it's no fun for an outsider to come in. I understood the situation. But she told me, I don't need your help here. I can do my job better than you can do this job. And so we spent the time together, and so I gave them all an evaluation. It was 12 points to evaluate yourself. 1 to 5. You can do 2.3. You can do the points if you want. There's a comment area, and I told them, I said, listen, 5 is Jesus, so no one gives themselves a 5. And 1 is I'm not quite sure why you're here. If you show up on time and you work hard, you're a 3. So let's go from there and give yourself 3.26 or whatever the case may be. It's a 12-point evaluation. And so we did that, met with the staff, it's going well, but this one staff person was not happy all day long, just burning lasers into my skull. And so we sat down and she gave me her evaluation. And it was 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, no comments. I mean, it maybe had taken 20 seconds to fill it out. And the doctor had given me complete freedom to say whatever needed to be said. And so I looked at the evaluation, and I looked at her and I said, well, we're going to let you go. And she's like, why? And I said, we are holding you back. I was like, I mean, you've got these areas so secure, I think you should go on. You can make more money, you can do more things, but if this is where you're at, this job is literally holding you back. So we appreciate all your service. Now the doctor is sweating because she does need this staff person. She is talented, but she's not working in the team whatsoever. And so her staff person, in a moment, and a slight watering of the eyes, and then finally said, I really need this job. And we said, we really need you. But this can't keep going on. So if you're willing to ask for help to prove for your job, the doctor's willing to give it to you, and I will as well. And one of the most amazing, and I don't take credit for this, the employee was rescued. Not every employee is rescuable. That's a new word. I mean, no, and you know that, right? You've wanted to rescue an employee before. But it came down to a couple of things. It came down to the doctor willing to ask for help, and the staff person finally willing to ask for help. Guys, for all of us, no matter what your position is, spouse, parent, manager, leader, student, if we don't ask for it and we're not willing to receive help, we'll miss those pivots. If we don't ask for help, we're saying, I'm self-sufficient. I know everything I need to know, and we just don't. So, but for the sake of time, let me move on. The first thing I would recommend to you for pivoting and shifting is asking for and a willingness to receive help. The second one is coaching and mentorship. Coaching and mentorship. Let me offer my definition or the distinction between the two, if you don't mind. There's a ton of them out there. But here's the difference I would say for coaching and mentorship. Coaching, you pay for a specific goal. Mentorship, you don't, but they have full access to your life. One's easy to find, another one is incredibly hard to find. Coaching is just that. Imagine a football team, basketball team, a color guard, marching band. We've got some experience with coaching, right? You've got someone who's like, I'm going to get you where you need to go, and you need to listen to me and follow me, and I'll get you there. And typically, as professionals, for good coaching and for your own investment, you have to pay for it. You do. If there's no investment, there's no commitment. Mentorship is that person that you absolutely trust. You've been there. You've gone ahead of me. I'm going to open up my life to you, and I'm willing to listen to anything you have to say. A coach, you can just fire and go find another coach. I don't recommend that. Do the work, find a coach. But mentorships are very different. Let me share with you a couple of examples. With coaching, I've got to say that the best investments I've made as a professional is when I've chosen to get a coach. Chosen to get a coach. If I look back at my leadership failures over the years, it's when I just made the mistake in the beginning and just thought I could do it all myself and didn't get a coach. Why didn't I get a coach? Again, I'll go back to pride or ego. I'll also go back to maybe I couldn't afford it. Maybe I wasn't willing to listen to other people. I was stubborn. I mean, quite often in pivoting and shifting, it's not always the case. But we don't make them quite often because we're just not willing to admit that we need outside help. Early on, I want to give examples in both ministry and business, because that's where we've been for the last 20-some years. But early on in our business, I had started a business before, knew what to do, right? But the quarantine happens in 2020, and at that point in time, we decided we need a coach. We need someone who's going to give us homework and hold us accountable and say, listen, you're not as good at that as you think you are. You could be good at this, but this is where you have to put your time. And what we did is we stripped I did share this yesterday with some friends, we stripped our business bottom up. We went through every single deposit we'd ever made, we categorized it by the service, and then we took that into multiple services, which changed our mission and our vision, and then from that we changed our name and our logo bottom up. Couldn't have done it without a coach. Couldn't have done it without someone who would speak into our lives. And you guys are going to be privileged enough to hear our coach, Susan Coleman, speak to you after meeting. Because she made that investment. And she was definitely honest with us. But a good coach does that, right? A good coach, you allow to look at exactly what you're doing, and they give the road going forward. They make the playbook. They design the game plan. Let me show you a little bit about mentorship. Mentorship is hard. You don't stumble into mentorship. Let me tell you about Terry Traylor. He was my mentor who passed that I mentioned earlier. Terry was a church planter. He had started 4 churches, and then he had settled in Raleigh to start other churches. And Amy and I made a deal when we got married, and that deal, that partnership was we just did not want to go into ministry in any way. I should have sworn off good looks and money and fame, but I didn't. I swore off. I didn't want to go into ministry. Because we've both been preacher's kids. It's not the easiest route to take. We knew the things that went with that. And we sat down to have lunch with Terry for the first time. I had met him briefly. Amy had never met him. And at the end of eating that wonderful Mexican meal, he looked at us and goes, I could see you guys planting a church. And we both openly laughed at him. Like we just, it wasn't mocking, but we're like, you don't know what we've been through. That won't happen. And Terry, what a good mentor does, please take this away. A good mentor sees what you can do before you can do it. Good mentor looks at you and sees capabilities in you that you can't see. Or at least maybe you see, but you don't have enough faith that you can actually accomplish it. And that was Terry's gift. He got me into seminary and made me commit to 5 years of grad school and all that, and then went from there to there to there, and that was Terry. And you know what? Terry and I laughed and cried together. We yelled and screamed at each other over a Wendy's Baconator one time. You go through, but that's a mentor, right? The mentor, you say, here is my life, and they speak into it because they can see what you can't see. They've got to be ahead of you. It doesn't even have to be the same field, but they've got to be ahead of you. And they're transparent. And they see the transparency that they can see, just see what you can't see. When Terry passed, it was just crushing. And we went to his funeral, and they rented a music venue. And on stage, there were 7 stools of 7 different people that he had done that exact same thing to. And I was on that stool to just say what he'd done in my life. There could have been hundreds of stools up there, but that's the impact he had. He was a father figure to us. All those things. Now, for you might say, well, Gordon, where in the world am I going to find a mentor? Coaching? You can find 6 in this room, or you can go online and look for it. Coaching is just really a specific search, right? Mentorship's different. How in the world am I going to find a mentor? And then I'm blessed to have it. It took me another 6 years before I could find someone that I would call a mentor. You've got to put yourself in rooms with people who are smarter and brighter than you are. The cliche is true. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Because my mentor goes into rooms that are ahead of him. Right? And consistently and hungry to be in those environments. So moments like this, rooms like this, where you put yourself in a room where there are people who've got experiences that are way ahead of you. Put yourself in places and make that a value and a priority of who you are in your business. That you will purposely put yourself in places. And you know what? I can't believe how gracious people who are smarter than I am are. I ask them questions and they're like, oh yeah, sure. And they sit down and talk to me. And in every case that I've had with a mentor, there's never been like this bond in blood, like, you're my mentor now. Like at some point I might just wind up calling them my mentor. Put yourself in situations where you can be around people that you admire. Put yourself in situations where you can ask questions to people who are ahead of you. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be in your field, but that will make a pivot in your life like you cannot imagine. You'll be heading in one direction, and then you will get closer to your goals because you purchased a coach to help you specifically, or you have a mentor who you allow to dig into your life and speak real truth, personally and professionally. Well, let me share with you the third. We've talked about the willingness to ask for and receive help, and we've talked about a coach and a mentor, which you need both. You do. And the third one is you've got to commit to being a self-learner. Now, I made this one third on purpose. If I said self-learner first, you would have bought that in your mind and not the other two. But you've got to commit to being a self-learner. I lead a lead share at the chamber, and I love it. We get together twice a month. And part of the things we do at my lead share, every single time we get together, I'll say, hey, who's got a resource to share? Who's reading a good book? Seen a good YouTube, listening to a podcast, heard a great quote. Who's got a resource for us? Been doing it for 3 years. And I tell that group every single time, good quotes are always stolen. I don't know who I stole this one from. In a world of free information, ignorance is a choice.
That's right.
In a world of free information, ignorance is a choice. Every year, I forget how to put the string on my weed eater. But there's this one old dude on YouTube who tells me every year how to do it. I literally type in my brand, and there he is. At this point in time, I don't know if I'm ever going to remember how to do it, because that dude is there for me. But it's on YouTube. If you don't have time to read a book, you can find a book summary podcast that will tell you what it says, and it'll be 30 minutes long. Make the $25 investment to buy the autobiography. It's a good deal. We're so spoiled. We're like, $25 for a book. I mean, it's this person's life. And they've distilled it for you. If you do need a skill that doesn't require a coach or a mentor or a program, there are podcasts that will tell you how to acquire those skills. It's there for you, but it requires a commitment that I will be a self-learner, that I will constantly be learning. I will pursue less distraction, and I will pursue more learning. We all get caught up. I don't know what your car radio life is. Some of it is sports, some of it is talk radio. Those things, I guess, have their place. But man, if you got some time in the car, you can burn through a podcast at 1.5 speed and take in something really, really helpful. You know, your mentor or coach is probably going to give you a book to read. You should really read this book. And I get it. But reading is, everybody has different approaches to reading. I get it. Not everybody, we've got struggles with dyslexia and ADHD. I get the attention span issue, I promise. I do. My brain's like a hummingbird. I promise you I understand that. But taking a few moments for those things will enable you, when faced with a circumstance, to shift or pivot. And you won't even realize that you're implementing the skill or whatever it is that you may be walking through. Those things will make a tremendous difference and prepare you in ways that you can't imagine. Guys, I've been fortunate. I really have been. And despite that 30 minutes of darkness, 30 months of darkness, I have a tremendous amount of things to be thankful for. And, every night, I'm always like, girls, let's go to bed specifically thankful, right? Specifically thankful. It can be the meal you had, or it can be that your power came back on, right? Yeah. But if we aren't preparing right now to shift, the circumstances are going to get worse and more difficult to be thankful. COVID hasn't gone away, and some of you went 5 days without power last week. I walked 2 miles in the snow to try to get warm coffee from a 7-Eleven. I was not planning on doing that last week. and it was not open, and I really thought the end of the world had happened when the 7-Eleven's not open, or the day I'd be willing to drink 7-Eleven coffee, but I found out things about myself I didn't like that day. But any of you guys think any of that's going to change anytime soon? I am toxically positive. I'm not trying to be negative here, but we can all look at the landscape. It's impossible for the challenges we face right now to change overnight. At best, it's going to be a slow progression out. At worst, it's going to be a long progression out. And so I'm thankful. I really am. I have so much to be thankful for right now, despite those 30 months. And you, again, I don't mean to diminish. Some of you have been through darker periods. But moments like this, thank you. You invested in yourself today. Some of you invested in me, and I want to say thank you. Some of you did this just because I'm doing it, so I'm just saying thank you so much. But you invested in yourself today. And so I wanted to speak as personally as possible for you guys, because these few things, if you will allow them to become patterns and disciplines in your life, you really will change. If you know your goals, you'll get closer to your goals. Your relationships with your children and your spouses and your coworkers, they can improve. You can grow your business. You can grow into financial security. There's so many things you can do. But giving yourself the ability to make those pivots, is part of it. So what I'd like to do is, I've got a little bit of time here. I finished a little bit early, but it's always great. We've got some Q&A here, and if we have extra time in between, it gives you more opportunity to spend time with each other and coffee and food and drink. But I'd like to open up for Q&A. I think this room's got pretty good acoustics, but if you would speak up. And so I'd love to take any questions you might have. And I say this all the time. You can ask me anything you want. So it's just wide open. You can ask about the tactics and the pivots. You can ask personal questions. I'm pretty much an open book. But do you guys, anyone have any thoughts and questions about the pivots of asking for and receiving help, coaching and mentorship, and becoming a self-learner, or anything else that might have been a drip out of this? Yes?
On the topic of asking for help, can you tell us about the staff member who gave herself all 5s? How's she doing now?
So when the practice went so well, the doctor sold the practice, and I'd lost contact after that point. But the goal of that doctor was, can you help me improve the practice that we sold? And 6 months later, she sold the practice. And so my pathway was with the doctor, but the staff did implement the changes, and I was pretty excited for the doctor and her. But yeah, she hung in there for those 6 months. And so I really hope, that was probably 7 or 8 years ago. I really hope that those lessons, stuck. But thank you for asking. The only measure I had was it went well enough for the doctor to sell the practice. Yes?
You went. Oh, okay. Well, thank you. On the topic of mentorship, some suggestions on ways to find a mentor.
Part of my